sorts of details of this on the Niab web pages if you want to look at it in a little bit more detail. So the driver for this project was that we want to look at ways of reducing greenhouse gas emissions broadly. So this was the sort of the aim that was given to us by DEFRA, and we looked to do this by looking at those crops that are best able to capture carbon in the form of carbon dioxide and either put it into the soil or put it into cropping, and hopefully to lock it up there in one way or another. So there are a number of different crops that we were looking at, and we wanted to look at not just different types of crops, but also the way in which those crops were managed, the husbandry and the inputs. And all of this is seeking to look at progressing towards net zero, but sort of adding our part to it. And there's no doubt that there are rewards that are currently available, but there will be more in the pipeline in terms of rewards from government in order to incentivize farmers and indeed their customers to do this. And of course, along the way, it's absolutely vital that what we do is to ensure that by using these routes, we can help with the profitability and sustainable outcomes for a given farmer. And so really that's the kind of subject of what we want to look at today. It's a 4-year project. We're getting just under £6 million for it. We've got lots of different partners who are attacking the different areas. And as I say, we're looking to capture carbon, build farm resilience, enable data for offsetting emissions. I'm not going to talk about that today at all. And to look at value chains which enable you to be profitable within those sectors. So we're looking at food, forage and industrial cropping options. And the value chains are many out of the different crops. We'll talk about a few of them today, but for example, fibre, textiles and construction. We have a knowledge hub, so you can link up with the project by signing up to the newsletter on the web pages, and that way you will get to the data quicker than just waiting until we publish this by the usual methods. And so that platform will also help to see how you as a farmer can achieve these sorts of sustainability goals, both with farmers and also their customers. What are the crops? So we're looking at rotational cover crops. We had a webinar about that just recently, but there will be more if you missed it. Annual fibre crops, which is today's subject. And in the future, you will see links to perennial food, feed and forage cropping, including, excitingly, a perennial cereal for human food, and finally perennial biomass crops, and particularly looking at miscanthus, willow and poplar. So there I am, not a wonderful picture of me, dealing with elements of keeping the project going and project management. You can see there's work packages associated with all of those crops and looking at what's happening in the soil, and there's elements of crop genetic improvement across some of them, and of course the value chains and the knowledge hub. And these are the outputs. So we'll be looking at field trials and demos. We'll be looking at measurements right across the piece, soil carbon capture. We'll be looking at particularly crop genetic improvement in hemp and variety trait evaluation and molecular breeding, and development of biorenewable fibre-based construction and other materials, and all sorts of considerations along the value chain and life cycle analysis, of which there will be other webinars in the future, and all underpinned by the Knowledge Hub. So these are the partners, but I'm going to just go straight to the last slide. Here is a link. So there's a specific email for the project. There's also that link into our web pages, www.carboncapturecropping.com, and you can see just a quick picture of our first newsletter, which is shown in the middle there. Another one is hot on its heels. And of course, thank you very much, DEFRA, for the funding. Now, thank you for joining us. We have changed the order. So those of you that saw the agenda, we've had a little bit of a catastrophe that Heather Oldfield has got a little crisis with one of her children that is unwell. So she may or may not join us, but don't worry. I will cover for her and Jamie will fill in some of the bits that I don't. And we have a bonus speaker today in the form of Luke Cox from the NFU. So Jamie, I am going to pass over to you first. I'm going to, how do I stop sharing the screen?
Hopefully that's share my screen.
Perfect. So just to introduce Jamie. Jamie is from Unyte Hemp Limited. He is one of our work package leaders, particularly the one dealing with fibre crops, the opportunity. And over to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Lydia, and thanks everyone for joining us. So I'm going to cover off a little bit around the cultivation, and then Lydia's going a little bit further into the agronomy side later on. And I'm also going to cover some of the products that we can really look at as opportunities from both hemp and flax, and really from the industrial fibres that they can provide, and then some of the potential market capacities as well. So a little bit about ourselves. So as Lydia's just mentioned, I'm Jamie Bartley. I'm the CEO of the Unyte Group. We established in 2019, and one of our roles were technical advisors to the government's APPG for industrial hemp and CBD. We're currently the UK's largest licence holders for industrial hemp by acreage, albeit we're not growing all of that acreage at the moment. We've been undertaking large-scale research into hemp since 2019. We grew 240 acres of research crops 3 years in a row, and we grew 5 different cultivars at 11 different seed densities, which is really just trying to start our journey with establishing data, understanding how different cultivars performed, and really looking at the scale opportunities. As I mentioned, we're focused on decarbonisation at scale as a group. So all the different business units, that's really our key goal, and hemp fits wonderfully into that, as we're going to go into a little bit more. And we're always open to collaborations as well. So if anyone is interested, my contact details will be at the end of the presentation. Feel free to reach out to me anytime. You can see some of the images just down on the left-hand side of the various different entities that we work with as well. So firstly, I'm just going to put a little video on here, which starts off really right from the seed right through to harvest, and then some of the processing as well. I won't talk too much over here. Most of it's got some subtitles with it as well, and then we can go into a bit more detail in some of the slides afterwards. So I mean, seed at the moment is all imported into the UK, but Elsoms are looking to be able to supply seed from a UK perspective. And in the UK, we generally drill late April, early May. You need the soil temperatures to be 8 degrees or above consistently. Once it's in the ground, nothing but sunshine and rainwater, depending on what year it's like, some more than others. This site didn't have any fertiliser. The trial sites we have put some nitrogen on, so it's really down to the conditions of the soils, but it doesn't need any pesticides or insecticides currently. And circa 16 to 20 tonnes of carbon is sequestered per hectare, and that's obviously what we're really looking to validate with this project through the soil data and through the biomass data. But it can sequester considerably more carbon in the same size area of rainforest in the same growth period. And then, depending on the end uses, we use different harvest methods. This is 3 knives, hydraulic knives behind the tractor there, which we find works quite well. And this is another method using a Kemper header with a single blade in the throat, which just allows you to get around a 60 centimetre chop length on the straw, which works for the further processing. This was a stripper header, taking the seed heads off to clean the seed out, and you can use traditional combines as well with some of the smaller seed varieties. One thing we did do a lot of learning with during this harvest is that it's very tough stuff, so you do need the specialist equipment to do any part of the processing. Once it's harvested, we go into a retting period in the field, which is 2 to 3 weeks, where it's left in swaths in the field, turned a couple of times usually, tedded. And as you can see there, you've got the outside bast fibres of the crop or the straw, and then the inner part, the woody part, which we call the shiv. The retting process is a natural process using the bacteria, the moisture, and the sunshine, and that breaks down the lignin that binds the bast fibres to the shivs to help with secondary processing. Some more seed getting harvested there prior to cleaning. One thing with the seed is it's quite important to get it stable quickly, so get it temperature down, get the moisture down quite quickly, because it can go rancid quite quickly because of the oil content. So then we're into baling process after the retting, usually about 3 weeks. And then this is showing the primary process for the hemp straw, which is called decortication. And that separates the straw that you can see mixed there into the outer bast fibres in that image, and then the hemp shiv that you can see there. And then those two fractions go into different secondary processing products. So we'll just jump back into the harvest there. So both part of the video, the harvest is finished. And then this is the further processing once we get to this stage, which we can go into things like hemp packaging, hemp composites, which we've got some examples of there, hemp insulation, and also hemp composite boards. These are all viable products that are already in the market in different jurisdictions. Hempcrete's another one that we're very much focused on. I'll cover off a bit more. And these can be combined into modular off-site hemp houses, which then mean that we get really sustainable, healthy homes, very low carbon in construction, very low in volatile organic carbons, VOCs, so really healthy to live in. We can also make hemp textiles of multiple different types. Some examples here. And when we grow hemp for textiles, it's actually 10 times less cotton to cultivate and to process. Sorry, 10 times less water to cultivate and process than cotton is. So a big water saving. The hemp seeds, we've got nutritious hemp protein powder that can go into sustainable plant-based meats, for one example, or ultimate any replacement proteins. And from the hemp seed, we get a really nutritious balance of omega-3, 6, and 9, and all the essential amino acids. So all of these great products coming from just one crop, ultimately, because you can take the seed and take the fibre, which goes into the shiv, and the straw and fibre in the shiv. We've not even talked about bioethanol, hydrogen, bioplastics, which are all very viable products as well from industrial hemp. So hopefully that just gives you a little bit of a flavour of how hemp is the solution that our planet needs for so many different reasons, so many different industries as well. And this just a little recap here on the process, because it was obviously covered off quite fast there in the video. So once the hemp's harvested, it rets in the fields for about 3 weeks, and that, like I said, that's normally tedded a couple of times. And you're really looking to try and get an even ret, an even colour. If you don't ted it, you end up getting black spots on the straw, and that can have deficiencies in some of the end uses potentially, certainly for textiles, for instance. Then once you go into bales, go to the primary processors. And we'll cover off a little bit more about the infrastructure shortly, because there is a lack of infrastructure currently in the UK. But we get the two different fractions, and there is actually a third fraction that isn't shown here, which is a sort of a dust to waste fraction, which is about 10% of the overall volume that goes in. And that can be valorized into either briquettes for fuel, or it can be biorefined potentially. And we're also actually looking at a niche technology that will split it down into sugar solutions that can go into bioplastics and into a food grade protein, as well as clean water. So that's quite an interesting technology we're just exploring. These are the two products that we're very much focused on initially at Unyte, which are non-woven insulation, which is the top product you can see there, and also the hempcrete blocks. And both of those products can be used for new build and for retrofit. And to give you a sort of an example of the impact they can have on the downstream carbon as well, not just in the field. If we build a passive house today using conventional materials, that passive house will reach net zero carbon at 2070. Whereas if we build a passive house today using these hemp materials, it will reach net zero carbon in 2035. So massive impact in actually embodied carbon and also operational carbon of the property. So huge downward impact on the carbon cycles as well. So this is a little bit around some of the barriers that we're facing in the UK at the moment. I know Luke's going to touch on some of the licensing bits later on, but the biggest barrier really is the lack of infrastructure. There's two large-scale processors in the UK. Both of those are based up in Yorkshire. Nick Vose is one of our trial site farmers for the project as well. And there's a small pilot line in Leicestershire, and that's it at the moment. And one thing that we're really pushing for is localised processing of the right size, primary and secondary, which really then enables farmers nationwide to cultivate the crop, to retain the right value in returns for the crop, and also to avoid transporting straw and emitting lots of carbon as you're transporting products all around the country. But because that infrastructure, and as I mentioned earlier, it's the highest natural tensile strength fibre on the planet. So you really do need very robust harvest equipment, primary processing equipment, and secondary processing equipment to a certain degree. But it's really the harvest and the primary process that you need the very robust equipment for. And because that equipment isn't available at the moment en masse, we need large amounts of capital investment, because to give you an example, the infrastructure that we're trying to raise for at the moment, which will be building 5 million hempcrete blocks, 10,000 houses worth of insulation, and around 2,000 tonnes of hemp wood a year. That infrastructure for primary and secondary, we need to raise 60 million capex to deploy that. But that would allow 35,000 acres to be grown locally. And like I say, it really allows the products to go into the right mainstream markets at the right price point, and allows the farmers to get a viable return from the crop as well. So, and this brings me on to the last point on this slide here, which is scale. Due to the size of some of these end use markets that we can attack with industrial hemp and flax fibres, we need that volume, because they're huge volume markets, and we're not going to get any market penetration unless we can provide high volumes of products, which that means that large investments into infrastructure, and it means the larger cultivation areas as well. Again, these are just a little bit of a recap on some of the products we crossed off there, some that we didn't see in the video. So the left-hand side there is the hemp wood product that I just mentioned that we're going to be producing here in the UK. It's currently being manufactured in the US, and we've licensed it to manufacture here. And it's a like-for-like placing, and it's for oak flooring, but it has a 20% higher density and far more sustainable carbon footprint as well. Likewise, the hemp insulation, very viable product. It has none of the nasty VOCs or gases that we get off a lot of the petrochemical-based installations, which then we're all breathing in the houses that we're probably all sitting in currently. I know I am. Unfortunately, I'm not living in a hempcrete house yet. I'm working on it. And then we've got the food products as well, which again, all of these different products can come from one crop in one season. So it has so many different value layers, which means that the farmers can get a good return for the crop, because it can take so many downstream products from it. Hemp fabrics, again, the composites, the blocks, and just touch on the blocks again. Their performance is really imperative when it comes to the built environment, because, as an example, there's houses on the North Shores of Scotland that, without any heating on at all, their internal temperature all year round won't change between 16 to 18 degrees, because of the thermal mass and the thermal performance of the hempcrete. So it's got great acoustic performance, it's got great fire performance, but if you think about the impact over the lifespan of the house and the savings on fuel bills, and people talk about fuel poverty, you have a real big downstream impact from cultivating hemp in a rotation. So this is just a little slide here that I borrowed from the Hemp 30 report that York University did. It's a really credible report. I would strongly advise, if you haven't read it and you're interested. It sets out a great business case for lots of different products. But this is just really a slide, and I won't go into a huge amount of detail in every box, but it's just really these graphs at the bottom try and show you that the moment we're at around, or when this report was done, we were around 800 hectares of hemp being grown nationally in the UK. And this report's showing that if we go to around 80,000 hectares, potentially there's over 700 million in value per year from these products, because they're going into biomass, bioenergy, sustainable aviation fuel. Construction's the biggest use case for it, the biggest volume use case. Biomass on farms, so anaerobic digester, animal bedding, biochar is something that we've been very involved in that I'll touch on later. But again, biochar I think is a really viable option to look at, because you can then get into the carbon credit markets as well. And biochar carbon credits are valued far higher than forestry, for instance, carbon. So it just tries to give you understanding that there's huge market capacity there. And back to the point I made earlier, we need this investment into the infrastructure. Hopefully that's a lot of what this project that we're all involved in is going to be able to support and gain traction for as well. And I'm just going to finish off here around a subject that you may or may not be aware of when it comes to industrial hemp, and it's certainly not one that people talk around a lot, but it's a project that we're currently involved in. And this is going to talk around hemp's ability to phytoremediate. And just when I'm covering through these points, also this is very applicable to agricultural land. So if you've got agricultural land that's heavily impacted by pesticides, heavily impacted by insecticides, hemp potentially can be used in a rotation to clean those out the soils safely. And then, depending on the end uses, because you have to be careful of not going into food with high levels of pesticide, but it's certainly viable for certain agricultural applications and brownfield land remediation in the UK. So this site is actually Vaca Muerta in western Argentina. It's the world's second largest unconventional hydrocarbons resource. Sorry, I put my teeth back in. It's recently been granted a 30-year extraction permission for these hydrocarbons. So there's drilling, there's fracking on a very large scale. Unfortunately, this land is also very productive agricultural land that was irrigated the early part of the century. So huge amounts of work went into irrigating the land very successfully, very productive, fertile land, but it also sits over the top of this huge hydrocarbon field. And unfortunately, because there's not been a great amount of control, there's fracking muds everywhere in lakes that are flammable. There's drilling muds that are everywhere in that pond you can see there at the top image. That's impacted on the groundwater contamination. That's got into the irrigation systems, and that's also got into the agricultural soils and contaminated those. So it's had a huge negative environmental impact, and it's only been operating for 3 years under the permission. So we've been engaged to put, and they've tried 3 or 4 different solutions so far. We've been engaged to provide a solution using phytoremediation and ultimately using hemp. And the way hemp does that, it's a hyper accumulator of multiple different contaminants, both organic and heavy metal contaminants. And it will actually take those different contaminants to different places in the plant. So certain metals will go to the leaves, certain metals will be stored in the roots, certain metals will be stored in the stalks or the biomass. So they do, a lot of contaminants go to different parts of the plant. But because of its deep taproot, it's around 1.2, 1.5 meters. That's some of the research that we're covering off as well within the field trials as part of the project. But that allows hemp to actually access lots of those contaminants and potentially draw them in, so cleaning them out of the soil and drawing them in into the plant. And then one of the other solutions that we're using here, and again, it's biochar that I mentioned earlier, and I'll just go into a little bit of how biochar works. Biochar is produced using a technology called pyrolysis. Pyrolysis is an energy from waste technology in essence. So it's a large cylinder, and you heat the biomass up in there, and you heat it up to about 600-700 degrees Celsius in a zero oxygen environment. And what that means is the biomass releases what they call syngas. That syngas can then be extracted and used to power the facility. So it's self-generating, so very, very low carbon. So you just use a little bit of propane to get it up to temperature. And then it's a continual cycle. And that high temperature and zero oxygen environment means that all of the cellulose in the biomass changes the long carbon chains which are in the cellulose into a very solid carbon ring of carbon molecules, which means that's a very stable format of carbon. But also the cellulose still has a very porous structure. So that allows the biochar then to, one, not break down into carbon for at least 1,000 years plus. When people talk about permanence of carbon, they talk about biochar having above 1,000-year permanence, so one of the highest amounts of permanence. But also the porous nature of it allows it to suck contamination in from the soils and the groundwater specifically, and hold that contamination in there, and therefore act as a really good natural filter, which then will retain and can be cleaned out the soils, and therefore acts as a constant filtration. So those are some of the solutions that we're providing for this project here, but there are also some viable solutions. If you've got areas of land that have got poor soils or groundwater issues, then certainly hemp could be explored as a solution to remediate some of those. And again, if anyone would like to go into any more detail about any of these topics I've covered today, happy to go through those. So like I said, thanks for joining us all today. And my contact details are on the screen there, so I'll leave them there for a second in case anyone wants to take them out and reach out. Feel free to, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentations.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jamie. That's really good. We may call on you to come back to augment some of the things that I'm going to talk about.
That's fine, Lydia. I'm here, ready and waiting. I'll just stop sharing now.
Right, so I am going to, before we go to my next presentation, I just want to invite any of our participants to ask Jamie any questions about some of the things that he's been saying. Peter, I see your hand.
Thank you, Jamie. So from a grower's perspective, it looks attractive, but when you then start to look where the risk factors might be, the first thing that comes to mind is that August is very often the wettest month, which is probably the month when it's going to be on the ground for 3 weeks. Retting.
Yes, I mean, generally, if you go, it depends on your end use piece, because the seed cultivars you have to leave to mature a bit later, because you need about 75% maturity in the seed heads before you harvest the seed. So seed is a slightly higher risk because it's later in the season. Fibre, you can generally start cropping because it's stopped vegetating around first week, second week of August. So you're on the deck first, second week of August, potentially retting for 2 or 3 weeks then, and then you're looking to bale early September for your fibre. You're potentially middle of September to end of September for some of the cultivars do vary slightly with the different maturity dates. But for the seed cultivars, you're sort of middle to the end of September is your sort of harvest date, and then potentially you've still got to try and wreck your field. So I'll be honest, I have had issues where I've taken seeds in some of our trial years where it has been a wet year, and then we've struggled to get the straw off the fields after the retting period. But then other years we've had no issue at all. My model at the moment initially is purely focusing on fibre to de-risk that harvest period, especially when we look to scale to 35,000 acres of harvesting. We're looking to really try and get that as early window as possible. And some of the genetic work that York University are doing under the work package 8, I think it is, of the project, is looking at potentially trying to shorten the cultivation period of some of these cultivars to just again de-risk them for the UK conditions.
Well, August is the wettest month of the year, and it sounds to me like, you know, whatever you do, it's going to be on deck in August for 2 or 3 weeks.
Can I just actually continue on from what Jamie was saying, because I guess some people might in this group not know exactly what we mean by retting. So retting is, if you like, an old English word for rotting. And so if we get moisture and a bit of warmth in August, that is exactly what we want. We literally do want, that's why we're putting it on the ground. We want it to be in contact with the soil microbial community, i.e. the fungi and the bacteria that are sitting in the soil. And what they do is they get onto the stems that are now lying flat, and they will just initiate the rotting process. So Jamie's saying quite rightly that we're looking at 3 to absolutely maximum probably 5 weeks of that process. And if it is in fact dry and cold, that is not what we want, because the reason why we do that retting is that if it's a fibre industrial crop, we want the bonds, the little cross connections in the plant between the fibres to be broken down by those fungi. And then when it's harvested and it goes to the next stage, which is the pre-processing, it goes through the processing machine and the fibres will naturally come apart from each other. And if you haven't gone through that retting period, then A, the machines struggle to separate the fibres, and B, you will not get full separation of those fibres, so you won't get a perfect end product. So yes, it is wet in August, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and notwithstanding what you say, Lydia, there comes a time where it has to be taken off the field and baled up, and if it's not in a dry condition when that happens, you're asking for big trouble in mine.
Yes, and so we are always at the vagaries of the weather. I think that once you've gone through that retting period, and I do see your hand up, Kevin, we find that the material starts to dry out. So when the sort of the natural kind of plant fibers start to rot down, and the species of fungi and bacteria that are involved in that retting process are things like botrytis and fusarium and alternaria. So the sort of species that you would anticipate would be involved in actual pathogen issues with a crop rather than just the retting. And so it enables that crop to dry out. So even if you have just a few days of dry weather, once it's gone through that retting process, it will dry out very quickly. Jamie, do you want to add to that? And then we'll take on Kevin's question.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I suppose just to give a bit of perspective there, the four sites this year, Peter, for the trial sites were, one was Andover, one was Ely, one was Uttoxeter, and one was Yorkshire. Yorkshire was very wet up there during the period that we were trying to harvest. The harvest wasn't too bad. It was the baling period, and the retting period was very wet up there. That site got baled probably about 2 weeks later than the other sites, but all of those 4 sites were all baled with no issues at all post retting within that sort of time period. Just to give you sort of an understanding. So to Lydia's point, that yes, we do need the rain in August, but you don't. It's not an exact science, obviously, as well. Like a lot of things with farming, it's about just trying to pick that weather window. But certainly over the years, we've only had 1 year, and that was actually because we were so late in the year that we couldn't get it off. We've never had any issue when we've been harvesting August onwards.
Yeah, thank you. So can I move on to Kevin, and then I'll come to you, Ian Fullerton, in a moment.
Just as a quickie, actually, I was wondering, Jamie, if the price of insulation and construction materials from hemp will be more expensive or cheaper, or the same price as the current ones?
They will be the same price if we can get that 60 million of infrastructure. You have to do it at that scale to make it cost comparable for the conventional materials. And unfortunately, the legislation and the government aren't moving hard enough on the house builders to actually force them to do anything other than do what they're doing. All the houses they're building today, we're going to have to retrofit in 10 years' time. So it's ridiculous at the moment, the houses we're building with. But yes, so to your point, Kevin, if we do it at that scale, it will allow us to go into all cost comparable and potentially lower if we needed to. But it's unfortunately the number of investors I've talked to, they go, oh, it's great, can't we do it for 6 or 7 million? But you just cannot go into anything other than your grand design type eco properties unless you go in at the industrial scales.
Thanks, Jamie. Ian, yes, Ian. So the question is, what in our opinion is the best variety for fibre? Heard about Futura 75, but there are others to consider. So this is something that would have been covered in a bit more detail by Heather. So I can sort of half answer it, and then I'll come to you, Jamie. So Futura, we've seen this trial. We've got trials going with a number of fibres around the country, and Futura 75 is a brilliant variety. It's one of the 6 that we are trialling and that are registered for use in the country. It's the right THC content and is a good one, but there are others available. Jamie.
Yeah, so I mean, to that point, I mean, certainly Nick's a big fan of Futura, and Nick grows quite a lot of hemp up in Yorkshire as well. We personally have gone for Santica 27 is our preference for fibre. We've had real good successes. I mean, we had some crops up in, it was outside the project. We had some crops in Shropshire this year, and we had 3.8 meters consistently across the whole field. So I mean, it was, yeah, certainly we've had a lot of success with Santica over the years. But yeah, Futura or Santica, I think, are both viable fibre crops. And again, to Lydia's point, we've got 4 fibre crops in the trials. So again, we're going to look to generate this robust data over the 4 years across the 4 locations.
Thank you. A quick, Judith, I know we're going to run out of time, and it's really great to have all these questions. Jasmine, I'm looking at you. Wave at me if I really need to carry on. But
no, I was just going to say there's a question from Zoe, which is about clarifying.
Sorry, my mouse. Judith first.
Yeah,
can answer that actually. Mechanical decortication cannot get around retting. We absolutely need some retting first. If you try and put the material through the decorticator without any retting, it will basically not be happy. That's probably the quickest answer to that question. I'm sure you're not going to disagree with me there, Jamie.
No, you're right about that. I mean, I'm just looking at the second part, where it's animal bedding structure. The part of its process. No, I mean, the retting actually stabilizes the material, so it doesn't degrade further once you've retted it and baled it. I mean, the ideal moisture is around 10 to 12 to 14%, and the bales, but that's the target that we're trying to aim for when we bale the hemp. But no, it won't continue to degrade, but we do have to have that retting process for the separation. I've looked at lots of different processing technologies globally, and I've not found any that can handle unretted hemp. The only other scenario where they do undertake in China, which is water retting, but it's hugely environmentally detrimental to the groundwater, because you get a lot of toxins build up that then leach into the groundwater. So that is another scenario, but absolutely not one that I don't even know if it could be legally viable in the UK. I think the EA would have quite a lot of problems with it. But yeah, so that's just really with the scenario where we are. I'll just come back to Zoe's question now.
Equipment currently exists for hemp?
Yeah, so there's 2 decortication lines of primary processing of commercial scale, which are up in Yorkshire. One is East Yorkshire Hemp, and the other one is Harrison Spinks. Harrison Spinks use hemp fibres to make a layer in their quite expensive mattresses, and all very nice mattresses as well, I would add. And then sorry, Nick has animal bedding as one of his products. He's also the main supplier for hempcrete shiv, because hempcrete can be used in a traditional format where it's mixed up on site. The shiv, the lime, and the water is hand mixed on site and then either used as a infill or potentially it could be shuttered and used in that method. And then also Nick's other products are briquettes, which he sells as fuel logs as well, hemp logs. So those are the main commercial options at the moment. There is it's really a pilot size processing line in North Leicestershire at Elshilton. Roger does a lot of R&D on different natural fibres, nettles, flax, all sorts of hemp. But it's not really a commercial operation as such. That's more of an R&D facility. Hopefully that answers your question, Zoe. With regards to harvesting on that side, there's 3 of those harvesters you saw in the video with the hydraulic knives now in the UK. One's over in Cambridge and the other 2 up in Yorkshire. And then the forage harvester is just a standard forage harvester with a Kemper header, a maize header on it. But it's been adjusted to take all the knives out of the throat of the forage harvester, apart from one, and then the belly plate's taken off as well. So again, that could be standard equipment with a bit of modification available locally. And that just allows the swath to get left underneath the belly. It'll drop out the belly plate of the harvester. Hopefully that's answered your question there, Zoe.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think hold on to them because I'm going to dash through.
Chris, I'm
going to dash through what would have been Heather's presentation. As I said, for those of you that joined us late, Heather's had a sick child crisis, which obviously takes precedence. So I hope you can see my screen. Somebody tell me. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Lydia, we can see screen. Although it's not in presentation mode, Lydia, it's in post mode.
Oh dear, that's really
try that one with the little screen at the bottom. Next one long.
That one?
No, next one.
That one.
The one with like the slash through the screen, Lydia. That's
Thank you.
There we go.
Is that working now? I've gone completely black for me.
Maybe I'll undo that. We could just try.
Okay, that's not great.
I could share my screen, Lydia, if that will be easier.
Yes, I don't know what's working there. Let's try that again. Oh, share. No, that's no good, is it?
Yep, that's fine, Lydia.
That's better, Lydia.
Yeah.
Oh, you can see that just the one slide.
Yeah.
Perfect. Right.
Good.
So, let's just. So I'm going to dash through some of the agronomy for flax, and I think what a lot of people ask first is what is the difference between flax and linseed? They are essentially the same species, but different varieties, and they've been bred separately for some years. And so when we were looking to set up this project, we wondered whether it would be interesting to look at dual use. And after quite short discussion, we decided, no, it's important that they have been bred for very different uses. So a flax plant is taller, it's slightly more robust, it is not branching at the top, so you get fewer seed pods, but you get a nice, long, strong fibre. And it is consequently slightly easier to grow, and it's got slightly more robust qualities compared to linseed. However, it is broadly quite similar. So for drilling, it needs to be drilled about 3 centimeters. Combination is ideal to give it a loose top of the soil. You need a level seed bed, and this is more important than for hemp because not only does it give you that synchronous growth, of which more in a moment, but it's really important that when you then come to retting and harvest, that you have a nice, smooth, flat surface to work on, because it's obviously a much shorter crop. We're talking about probably up to a metre, unlike sort of up to 3.5 meters or even more for a hemp crop. The even emergence is also vital for even ripening. And when you are drilling, the drilling speed should be a maximum of around about 6 kilometers per hour to enable that even placement to facilitate all of those things above. Now, it's frost sensitive, as indeed hemp is, and so you can probably go in a little bit earlier than hemp, but not too early, and that's obviously up to you to know what your local weather conditions are. It's only sensitive during that early emergence, so if you have emergence followed by an odd, very late frost, then you'll probably get away with it. Sowing rate's quite high. We're looking at 1800 seed per meter squared, and this gives us an equivalent of about 115 to 120 kilograms per hectare total seed weight. Moving on to inputs, we're looking at about 70 kilograms per hectare, so it's not super hungry. It requires about 50% of that during the emergence up to sort of early growth, so a lot of farmers might look at splitting that input. So having a start dose of about 25 to 30, and then a little bit more later on. Carrying on with agronomy, for initial growth, it's important to know your P and K levels. And we didn't talk about nutrients that much with hemp. I will actually come back to hemp a little bit, and probably Jamie will augment what I've got to say. But sticking with flax, we're looking at 40 to 60 kilograms of phosphate, and 140 kilograms of potassium per hectare, and that P is vital for initial growth, so it's definitely worth having a look at soil analyses to make sure that you've got that P. I know a lot of the UK soil has got a reasonable amount of P and K in it, but they are vital in those initial phases. And then, interestingly, when you do harvest, you go through that same cutting and retting, you will get a return of that potash to the soil. So that's nice in terms of your input for your following crop. Now, unlike hemp, which is obviously a very tall, robust, vigorous species, the flax is quite a bit shorter, and so it's absolutely vital that you get your pre-emergence weed control, and Callista is one of those that are recommended, is good in this regard. Moving swiftly on to diseases, we have Fusarium, Botrytis, Verticillium, and Septoria. All are seen in the crop. So some of the information that we're giving you here is actually gleaned from our interaction with Dutch and Belgian growers, who I guess are potentially a little bit in front of the UK in going back to looking at this crop. We haven't seen that at our farm trial sites at the moment, but it's certainly worth keeping an eye out for those. So this is a lovely picture that was given to us by Andrew Stevenson from the East Scottish growers. So it's very happy to grow under cooler Scottish conditions. And we're teasing you a little bit here because this is relatively new equipment that they are using in Scotland and in other parts of Europe. This is a hemp puller. So if you look, I don't know whether you can see.
Black's pulling in. He said hemp.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. This is, no, you don't want to be pulling the hemp. This is a flax puller. So if you look closely at these two rows that have been pulled, it's just pulling the top little part of the root out. So flax root will not go down as far as hemp, but it is a deep rooter, and you will get those carbon and soil structure benefits. You're not pulling the whole of the root out. That would be ridiculous because it's going down at least 30 to 40 centimeters, probably longer. We're struggling to find out exactly how far, but it means that you're getting the whole crop, which can then be used into the industrial fibre uses. Now, I've just summarized the hemp agronomy as well, and actually I'll just nip back to that one. So up until the beginning of our project, which was earlier in spring of this year, there was literally only one recommended flax variety that was available for UK farmers. There is now 6 that have been registered by Elsoms Seeds. It's just possible that Heather might be able to join us at the end of this webinar. But if you want a little bit more information about those varieties and about potential new ones that they're going to bring in, I suggest that you contact Heather Oldfield at Elsoms Seeds, or indeed anybody else in that group. And they are very open to farmers contacting them and saying, you know, what are the ones that are looking good for us, and what are their sort of pros and cons. So a little bit more about hemp agronomy. So the drill date, I mean, that's a very broad drill date there, and that sort of depends on local conditions. If you went in as late as June the 10th, I think you would be unwise. Let's leave it there.
Disappointed.
Yeah, disappointed, that would be a good word. But as close as April to the 1st to get your maximum yield potential. But again, not to go in early, as Jamie rightly said, you have to wait till the soil temperature warms up. And if you go in too early, you'll get reduced germination, and then you will also be disappointed. And we are going to cover this a little bit later with our colleagues from the NFU, but for hemp, it's absolutely vital that you have your license before you drill, absolutely vital. And that's obtained by the Home Office. I think that Luke's going to tell us a bit more about that, but you have to go on the Home Office website. You have to put in all your details. You have to say where and when and what you are planting, and you have to have and have paid for your license before you drill. And you know, it's a faff and it's a bit of a pain, but it's vital that we do have the public to be on side with this new crop, although it's an old crop as well. And we do need to protect the public in terms of any of the possible deleterious effects. So we're all in support of the Home Office that this is needed, but I think we'll probably all agree on the farming side that we could do a little bit of tweaking. They, sorry, that was a little bit more on that than I expected to say. We're looking at a low end requirement, and I say 150 to 190 kb. We probably can get away with less than that. And again, as with flax, check your soil first. Pre-emergence weed control might be useful. It's, as I said, a very robust crop, and generally speaking, farmers don't have an issue as long as it's not too late. So looking back up to the top bullet point, if we went in as late as June, I think you probably would have some weed issues, especially with some of the shorter seed crops. Diseases, we really haven't seen diseases in the hemp crop. However, you know, this is one of the things that we're looking at in the CHC3 project. And I'll come back to this in a second. We have seen a little bit, and I'll come back to that in the following slide. So I think I just want to dash through these. A little bit of P during establishment, 52 to 57 is figures I've been given. Other nutrients we've found on the continent, magnesium and copper can be a problem. Again, check your soil. Not usually an issue, and Jamie's not looking too worried about that. Pre-emergence weed control could be useful, and certainly Chenopodium fat hen can be a problem if you go in too late, so one to keep an eye on. And Jamie's already talked about retting and pre-processing in spades. I just wanted to show you this. So this was one site, and I've never seen this on any other site, but whilst we were doing some root assessment during this year, we did find this evidence of Botrytis cinerea. We know that's what it was because we took these little, can you see these little black dots? These are Botrytis infection. It didn't look like as if it was having any particularly profound effect on the growth. You can see them here as well, these little black bobbles that are coming up in this late harvested crop. They were on the roots, as I say, otherwise the crop looked healthy, but we're just keeping an eye on this. And in the center one, you can see a little tiny bit of fusarium was coming in this particular sample that was, as I said, coming towards the end of its life anyway. So not too worried at the moment, but I think with these crops that we're less used to, it's important to keep an eye on these. And then a kind of a resume of some of the reasons why you might want to reconsider both of these crops. They're both brilliant to grow in the UK. Just because we're not growing them now doesn't mean that they're not brilliantly adapted to our climate conditions. They've been grown here for absolutely years in the past before they sort of fell from grace. And the reasons that they were taken out of the UK rotation are more about probably politics and alternatives than that they were intrinsically not suited to both outputs and the climate. There are few pest and disease issues apart from those we've discussed, and there's emus in place as well. Quite low input and high yield potential. Soil organic matter gains for both of them, especially hemp. Lots of development in harvesting and in marketplaces. And then varieties, we are dealing with that within the project. So we've got, as I say, registration of new varieties or new and existing varieties for both crops. As Jamie said, infrastructure in development, but that's definitely a bit of a negative at the moment. And there's not enough of you out there. So any of you farmers that are listening, do take up Jamie's offer of getting in touch, and indeed any of us in the project. Now, I just wanted to show you this. This was a nice set of pictures that we had, again, from some sampling trips that we've been doing this year. And these are best samples, so I'm not going to bang on about that in too much detail. But basically, we're looking at the structure of the soil and whether the crops that we're doing, that we are growing, are having a positive impact on those crops. And on the left, you can see a nice soil structure, crumbly, good aeration of macropores and micropores. This soil on the right-hand side is less good. You can certainly see there was quite a lot of compaction here. This was at the farm gate, so an area which is always a bit prone to that. But what we were quite excited about was, though even these beautiful, robust hemp roots have a little bit struggled, they have found their way through, and they've absolutely tunneled through this highly compacted soil and found their way through. So if you do have a soil that's become damaged in some way, it's certainly a crop to consider in terms of amelioration of that soil. There's quite a big report that we did at Niab on hemp. You can find it at this webpage. It's worth taking a screenshot of that. And I don't know, Jasmine, whether you're able to put that into the chat, but that's quite a lengthy report that we did, funded by DEFRA, to which Jamie and others contributed. And you can get that on the DEFRA web pages.
Yeah, I will put that in the chat. If we can move to Luke, please, because we're going to run out of time.
Yep. So can you get rid of me and move on to Luke?
Yeah, if you stop sharing.
Oh, there we go. Fantastic. Thank you, Luke. Over to you. Oh, he's very quiet. Ray.
Yeah, sorry, I've hopefully you can see the right slides and you can hear and see me now.
Yeah, we can hear and see.
Brilliant. So yeah, very quickly, like you say, conscious of time, but I'm just going to touch on the policy issues in this area. I just put it all on one slide. So I think Lydia's already touched on the licensing system that we have to deal with. It's not known for its flexibility. It's controlled by the Home Office. It normally opens in January, and they give a decision in about late April, early May of that same year. That's pretty much the ideal drilling date for the crop. So in terms of getting seed onto farm and actually getting a crop in the ground, it poses a real challenge. Not just because obviously you need to get the seed once you've got your decision, and you probably don't want to be purchasing seed ahead of getting that decision in case you can't grow it, but also in terms of longer term planning your cropping rotations, that obviously has quite an impact, not being able to plan in advance. So yeah, it's not practical at the moment, and it creates a barrier for upscaling and investing in the market. So we'd like to see that licensing system moved across to DEFRA, and we'd like the application window to be the summer before planting, so it actually fits in with growers making decisions. So that was the point about the licensing system, and the licensing system allows the use of the seeds and the stalks, but not the flowers and the leaves. They're under a separate piece of licensing. Under the Procedure Crime Act 2002, the crop must be destroyed if the THC content exceeds 0.2%. There are plenty of varieties and genetics out there which reduce the amount of and sort of restrict the THC content in a plant. But like anything in a crop, the climate and the weather conditions can have a large impact on the specification of that crop when it gets to harvest. So all that risk being on the grower if the THC content does exceed 0.2% is obviously huge. So again, changes to the Procedure Crime Act would obviously de-risk it for a grower. I made a brief point on public perception, and that was really just capturing the fact that where licenses are given, they're normally very restrictive as the actual fields they can be grown in. So even if a grower gets a license, it normally has to be away from things like footpaths and roads and out of sight of the public, probably due in part to public perception. So there's an element there that even those who get licenses can be quite restrained into where they can grow hemp on their farm. And that also links back to the crop rotation piece when you're trying to fit hemp into a wider arable rotation. I think Jamie captured, and it's already been talked about, the harvesting and processing machinery that's expensive. So funding would be required for that. And I think the sustainability element is obviously huge in hemp for a number of reasons. I think having a government endorsed carbon credits trading platform would obviously open up further opportunities for the market. We see a similar scheme in the woodland sector already. And it'd be great to see something similar as the hemp market evolves. It's shown to absorb more carbon per hectare than any other commercial crop. It's not hungry for fertilizer. It's very good suppressing weeds, and it's got a deep taproot for soil structure as well. So ticks all the boxes for sustainability. And if we could have a scheme in place that helps promote that, that would be great. Hopefully I've whizzed through that, Jasmine, because I'm conscious that it's already 5:05, but very happy to elaborate further if anyone's got any questions.
That is absolutely brilliant, Luke. Thank you. And sorry I ran over a bit. I wasn't expecting to give a presentation myself. So any questions about licensing? I would add before. Sorry, Jamie.
I was just going to say, Lydia, just around the licensing, it's probably just worth noting that as much everything Luke said there is correct about the license application of windows. They are a 3-year license. So once you've got that license in 1 year, you've got another 2 years on that license when you can plan your rotations. So that element, and I'm working quite closely with Chris Field, the Police and Crime Minister, who ultimately is the key holder to the licensing regime at the moment, and DEFRA, to try and enable some small changes initially. Longer term, yes, it would love it to go over to DEFRA. It needs primary legislation changes because the Misuse of Drugs Act doesn't differentiate between any form of cannabis. So to Luke's point, absolutely, a couple of words changing in proceeds of crime would de-risk things. We are working on them to go to 1% THC to allow that de-risking. Still the same cultivars, but just when we get hotter summers, it just de-risks it for the farmers, and also to try and change that windows to the summer, as Luke's mentioned, because those are key parameters that can be problematic.
And I think the positive thing is that both the agriculture ministers, or ministers dealing with agriculture from both sides of the House, be they Tory or if we move to Labour Party, are both committed to looking at this and potentially making it better. Peter, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. Look, this licensing thing has been on the go. The concerns around this for a number of months now. I've raised it personally with Mark Spence, the farming minister. His view is he hasn't got control of this at the moment, although they have got ex-DEFRA staff in the correct departments in government, put it like that. And I don't think it's a secret, perhaps, that Heather is meeting government later this week, or is it next week, to discuss this very issue with the Home Office, I believe. So, look, I think we need a lot of lobby pressure from a lot of directions on this, and it just needs to work. And practicality is key here. If I might also, just while I have the microphone, just suggest maybe there could be opportunities here for grower groups involved at a local level where capital expenditure on equipment might be more practical. And I'm thinking along the lines of the likes of the pea growers groups and those sorts of things. So it needs organisation. It needs structural funding, and that's perhaps where government could step in. I'm not sure whether Luke has any alternative views there, but
absolutely, Peter. I think it very much. I think if we could get some grower groups together, I'd always be happy to come and sort of engage and present around it and sort of do any Q&A sessions just to sort of fill in any gaps of knowledge and present any of our data. We're very open with all the data we've generated over our research, and more than happy to share all of that, because our sort of passion is to see as much of these crops cultivated across the UK, because we know it have a huge impact on biodiversity benefit and carbon benefit. And just a couple of points on the soil structure. The impact on the soil structure, we've seen following an increase in both winter wheat and spring barley, an increase of about 16 to 18% because of the benefit of the soil structure, and also the tap roots bringing the micro and macro nutrients and minerals up from deeper and depositing them in the shallow soils, and also a reduction of flood risk and runoff due to the increased attenuation capacity of the soil as well. So it does have a real impact all round on the soil because of that high root mass.
Yeah.
I whether there is opportunity for some sort of scoping project to look at grower groups within this overall project.
We are definitely doing that, and I'm fretting now because we're basically 10 minutes over time. People are leaving for school runs and things, but absolutely, we have 3 associations within the project partnership. So Jamie Bartley personally is heading up the Cannabis Industry Council, which will give you information and will form a voice for farmers and for users. We also have the Northern Irish Hemp Association, and in fact I can see VAR in the audience today. We have Kyle Esplen, who represents the Scottish Hemp Association, and we also have Nathaniel Loxley, who represents the British Hemp Alliance. So all of those are in our project, and we absolutely, yes, are pulling farmers together to get their opinions. So I'm going to literally wrap up because, as I say, I'm bad chairman. I've let us run 10 minutes past the end. It was great to meet you all. Please do sign up for our newsletter. You can find that on our site, and I see that Jasmine's put the link in the chat, as well as the report that is in there as well. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you all again soon. And thank you so much for the other speakers. Sorry you didn't get Heather today.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.